undermine the West. That would be the ultimate scenario.
This is your sort of best case scenario. Can I ask you to go to the dark side, and what is the worst case scenario you can see from what is happening now?
The worst case scenario is two-pronged, because on one hand, Hamas is taking civilians as human shields and they're embedding themselves in urban settings. But on the other hand, you have the civilians that are actively fomenting this type of culture that enables Hamas to do so. So it's a reciprocal relationship. So the worst case scenario would be that Israel identifies targets that are high value targets, and yet they're in densely populated settings, and that the mass casualties are sky high, and that would be unavoidable if Israel wants to eliminate Hamas. So, for example, if there is Hamas command and control under a hospital, and it's a very high value target, and it would be proportionate for Israel to target that location, even though it's a hospital. The dark scenario would be mass casualties, which undermines Israel's ability to effectively continue its combat, because it will receive international condemnation for it. So Israel is really fighting a war with its hands tied behind its back. And the worst case scenario is the slaughter of Israeli soldiers and huge collateral damage of Palestinian civilians, and the inability to make an effective distinction between combatants and civilians because of that grey area that has been created between combatants and civilians due to the predominance of that ideology that is there.
Right. Just a final question. This country, Britain, has a lot of historical baggage. You know, whenever you speak to an Arabic person or Palestinian, they will remember Arthur Balfour and the Declaration in the 1917. What role do you reckon UK, post-Brexit UK, not part of the EU anymore, diplomatically can play in trying to push for a best case scenario, or the better scenarios?
I think that your question is linked to a broad issue of Britain being a middle power. And as such, Britain can really affect change by working closely with the United States, but also working in a synergistic manner with other middle powers to affect change. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about, let's say, the Abraham Accords. Britain at the moment now is attempting to secure a free trade agreement with the GCC as a bloc. So how could it complement the United States-led Abraham Accords? How could it complement trade deals to deepen the expansions of certain industries, such as automobiles or such as high-tech, in the GCC? How could it contribute to the increase of GDP amongst these states? Now that's quite significant. So Britain couldn't independently spearhead it, but it could definitely deepen and widen it, expand it to become much more significant.
Right. I think that's about it, unless you have some really important, interesting point of the upcoming discussion, let's say the one you will have in a couple of days. I was reading the preview is saying that, you know, the biggest challenge will be the tunnels. Could you explain, let's say, to someone watching it in Argentina or Mexico, what is this metro of Gaza, what we're talking about, and how from a military point of view it's such a daunting task?
Hillary Clinton, a couple of years ago in the Washington Post, published an op-ed decrying the fact that international aid had gone to Gaza, but that aid hadn't been used to build hospitals, schools, medical facilities. What it had done, what it was allocated to, was to create a whole hundreds of miles underground of tunnels that are concrete fortified, in which they may lead under a kibbutz, they may lead into an Israeli civilian center, where they will be able to pop up underground, overground, to surprise Israeli soldiers that are going in on a ground offensive. So the reason why Israel is taking its time to identify as many targets as possible from the air before going in on the ground is because it's very possible that its troops could be surrounded by people just popping up from underground tunnels where they're storing lots of rockets. So it's quite a dangerous scenario.
Right. I was reading, I think that's it. Thank you very much indeed. I was reading today in the morning